Welcome back. I'm Mike Demko, and today we'll be looking again at the game of sweep. In our last video, we talked about the basic rules. Today, I want to look at some of the more exceptional situations that can come up. As I did last time, I'm going to switch over to Tabletop Simulator so you can see all the details. Let's get to it. Here we are in Tabletop Simulator again. I'm going to start off by showing you some technicalities and interesting things about how draws and guards work. And then in the later half of this, I'm going to go through heavier weight peel hits and also some stuff about the shot charts and how they work for hits. So let's start with draws. Okay, so if you watch the core mechanics video, you'll know that when we're playing a draw, we're choosing a target. I'm going to choose just the front of the house for a lot of this. But you choose a target by placing the skip token. You decide whether you're going to come from the left side curling into the right, or if you're going to come from the right side curling into the left. And then you roll a die to see where on the shot chart you end up. So this is a 3. That would give us the outside result, outside relative to the direction of curl that you've chosen. So in this case, we've chosen to curl from the right in towards the left. Outside of that is going to be over here. Once you've figured out the area that you're going to settle in, there's still the question of how close you are to the button if you were in the house and you're threatening to score points. So for that, we're going to roll again, and that's going to determine the location where your stone ends up. Any of those rolls you can re-roll by spending a sweep token. If you don't like the outcome of the re-roll, you can spend another sweep token and roll that. Now, one of the things that we didn't address in the video on basic mechanics is what happens if somebody comes through. Let's say I'm even trying to get here. All right, and that's another aspect of this. If your target is to the outside, or like one of the right or the left column of the sheet, you have to choose a handle such that you're coming up from the center. And the reason for that is that if you took the other handle, in order to reach your target, you'd be coming from off the sheet. Now, I know in practice on a lot of ice, you actually can come from the outside and reach the outside of the house in a real curling game, but it does tend to be a bit riskier, and a lot of skips will prefer to have most of the shot's path be up the center, just because you know the ice there better. From a game mechanics point of view, it makes some of the outcomes, in particular the unlucky outcome, really bizarre if you're coming from outside the sheet. So it's a tricky one to remember, but you have to come from the middle column if you're going to the outside. Right, but anyway, so let's say that red makes this shot, and let's say, for the sake of argument, the red succeeds with this shot and rolls to settle. Now, if red lands on a 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, that's fine. You know that we've already dealt with that in the other video. But what if red rolls a 1? Right, 1 is already occupied. So what we're going to say is that, okay, that represents a freeze. So red has frozen to the yellow stone. In board game terms, what we're going to do is we're going to stack the red stone on top of the yellow stone to indicate the freeze. But in terms of like actual play, what has happened is that the red stone has settled somewhere really close to the yellow stone, such that if anybody came through and hit the red stone, what would actually happen is that all the momentum would be transferred to the yellow stone, and the yellow stone would likely go out of play, and the red stone would just stay where it is. So from game mechanics point of view, we're gonna have these things stacked. If somebody tapped or hit this stone, these two stones will count as one stone until it's hit, and any hit or tap that occurs, it's just going to move the bottom stone, and the top stone is going to stay where it is. Let's say somebody comes along, and I have not actually seen this happen in practice in any of the games that I've played, but it can in principle happen. Somebody came through and rolled another one as a location. What we're going to do in that case, and we're not going to have a stack of 3, we're going to tap the bottom stone forward. What was previously the top stone becomes the bottom stone, and the new stone will stack on top, and then you'd have to roll to settle this back stone because it settled somewhere, and we have an outcome like this. There are two interesting properties of freezes in real play. One is that the front stone, or the stone that froze, is basically impossible to remove. So it takes 2 hits effectively to get rid of that stone instead of just 1. Another property is that when the stones are really close together, you know exactly which angle the back stone is going to be hit by the front stone. And so you can kind of like very, very strongly predict where that back stone is going to go. And that sometimes ends up being useful in real play. I don't have any mechanics to cover that in this game. I really only deal with that first case if it's really, really hard to remove that first stone. Now at the end of play, when we're scoring, let's say we have some other stones here. There's a question of, okay, how do we score frozen stones? And let's also have another freeze back here. So in the physical thing that we're trying to represent here is that the stone on top is just in front of the stone behind. From scoring point of view, that means different things in the front of the house than it does in the back of the house. In the front of the house, it means the bottom stone is closer to the center, most likely. In the back of the house, it means the top stone is closer to the center in most cases. And there's also just sort of the mechanical question of like, what about ties? What if there's some other stone that's at the same distance? How do we count that? The way we're going to do this is, before we score points, we're going to move all the top stones forward, or like back towards the shooting position, half a ring. And then we're going to score normally. So what would happen here is this stone here is at 1, 2.5 rings away from the center. So it'll be shot stone. Nothing outcounts that. The 3 red stones are 3 rings from the center, and this other yellow stone, which was also frozen to a red stone, the 2 red stones that were frozen to are tied. But this stone here is actually outside. Oops. Outside that, so it's 3.5 rings away. So that's how we're going to deal with freezes. Tactically, a freeze in the back of the house is really nice to have. And a freeze in the front of the house can be nice to have or might not be nice to have depending on the circumstances. So next I'm going to go through some stuff about the shot chart itself. There's a bunch of properties of how stones work in practice, how difficult shots are, that are implicit in the shot chart, and they're not really obvious if you're reading the rules. without thinking through what actually happens with the shot chart. So let's say, for the sake of argument, that you've called for a shot in the center of the house, and let's say it's a completely open sheet, there's nothing available. There are two outcomes, the 1 and the 2, that would have your stone actually end up on target. You have an outside outcome, which would have it to one side. You have an inside outcome, which would have it to the other side. You have a heavy outcome, which would be one past, and you have a light outcome. So without any sweeping, you only really have a 1/3 chance of being on target. A draw or a guard is a reasonably difficult shot. Now, of course, you can improve your odds by being willing to spend sweep tokens, but this variation in the outcomes is also part of what makes an end of curling interesting, because despite your best effort, you're not going to get, neither player is necessarily going to get what they want out of the shots that they've played, and you're going to have to deal with different sort of randomized circumstances as the end goes on. Now, also of interest is there are a few scenarios in which you could tap a stone, right? So on a 2, you could tap a stone that's diagonally ahead or knight's move ahead. On a 5, you could tap a stone that's in the same region. And on a 6, you could tap a stone that's directly ahead of what you're shooting for. And so if there's stones present, that changes the odds of where you can end up, right? So if all of these stones were present, you can't have an heavy outcome, because that instead would tap and would end up here. You can't have an inside outcome, because that would tap a guard and end up here. And one of your you can't have one of the 2 successful shots, or normally successful shots, would end up tapping one of these and end up out here. So things can really shift around according to what stones are in play. The ideal, there are a couple of things that can make a draw easier than shooting at an open sheet. So if there is another stone in play in the region where you are trying to go, you actually have a 3 in 6 chance of successfully ending up where you want, right? So a 1 or a 2 will land you in this region, but a 5 is a tap if there's another stone in your target region. And so if there's a stone in the target region, you actually have a better chance of ending up, a 50% chance of ending up where you want to be. Another thing that can really help is if you have a stone directly ahead of where you're trying to go, that turns an inside result, which would normally end up over here, into a tap of your own stone. So even though the stone that you threw doesn't end up on target, you effectively still end up with a successful outcome, because the stone that you tap, if it's yours, that's helpful. Now, of course, if this guard was your opponent's, that's a bad outcome. So there are a bunch of things that you can think about when you're looking at these draws, but the main thing I want you to take away from this, or that I think would be useful to take away from this, is that on an open shot, you have a 1/3 chance of success. And having backing, if there's a stone already at your target, that's going to make things easier. But in general, if you have stones ahead of your target, that's going to make things harder. But if those stones are yours, you might benefit from that. All right, let's now take a look at hits. a stone in play here. We want to hit this. Now for a hit, unlike with a draw where you have this nice looping curve, and the understanding is that the stone's coming from an adjacent column and swinging over at the last minute. With a hit, you're going pretty straight. The main difference from one handle to the other is in the possible outcomes that you would get. All right, an open hit, nothing in the way. You have 4 chances of outright achieving your target. The 1, 2, 3, and 4 are all hits. They have different outcomes, right? So one of them will hit and stay in the same region. 2 of them will roll to the inside. 1 of them will roll back into the outside. The 5 and the 6 are chips, or complete misses. So there's a possibility, there's a 50% chance that you'll still tap that stone on a 5 or a 6, but you won't necessarily knock it out of play. And certainly for a stone that's in the front of the house, you're not going to knock it out of play. But if that's on the side of the house or to the back of the house, the odds shift a bit. But you have basically a 4 and 6, a two-thirds chance of just outright making the shot, plus half of a 1/3 chance on the 5 and 6. So you have a 5 and 6 chance of hitting the stone and doing something with it on an open shot. If you do chip, you're going to be chipping the target stone diagonally back to one of those positions. So let's treat that as a 5 and 6 chance of success. How does this change if there are other stones in play? Now you might notice 5 and 6 chance of a successful hit is way better than a 1/3 chance of an open draw. So an open hit in this game is going to be a lot easier than an open draw, but it's going to get bad quickly. There's nothing that can make a hit easier. There's another stone in the same area. We have one of your 6 outcomes is a wreck on that. So there's a good chance that you'll hit that. That makes it harder by roughly 1/6. It's a bit less than 1/6 because you could end up rolling that again, but so that makes it harder. A stone 2 spaces ahead also has a chance on a 3 of a wreck there, and so that on its own reduces your odds by a 6. If you have both those conditions, you've lost 2 out of your 5 good outcomes. If you have a stone 1 area ahead, the 1 and the 2 will both wreck on that. So having a stone, but having a guard 1 area ahead of an area makes it really hard to hit stuff, or substantially more difficult to hit stuff there. So this shot here, your odds are a 1 in 6 chance of a clean hit, a 2 in 6 chance of a clean hit, and a 1 in 6 chance of a chip, which, depending on how you count, is anywhere from a 50% chance of a success to a bit worse than a 50% chance of a success. If you can get another stone involved in that, like a second guard or a stone in here, you're looking at worse than a 50% chance of success on the hit. And if you get this situation here, this is really bad. The 1 wrecks on this stone, the 2 wrecks on this stone, the 3 wrecks on this stone, the 4 wrecks on this stone. The only way you're going to touch this guy here, if you have a configuration like this, is with a 5 or a 6, which are both chips, which means that you're not going to get a roll that you like. The shot that you're throwing is the stone that you're throwing is going to go through the house. You have to make a coin flip. You could just miss outright. There's a 50% chance of an outright miss. If you make the coin flip, you're just going to be pushing the target stone back one way or the other. So this is a really grim situation. You want to probably not play these hits if they come up. If you're looking at something like this is playable, but it's going to be expensive. You should expect to be spending some sweep tokens on that. And this also limits the kinds of outcomes you can get, right? You won't get a nice roll. You won't get a nice roll to the inside because an outcome of a 2 or an outcome of a 3 both wreck on these stones. You also won't hit and stick because that wrecks on this stone. The only possible roll you can get is out here, which is not great for scoring purposes. But hey, I mean, if your goal is to get rid of the stone, you got to you'll take what you can get, right? Okay, so something I didn't talk about in the first game, throwing with more weight, or in the first video rather. All of the basic, on a normal hit that you call, if the shot works out, you're going to remove one stone. If you hit that target stone, it's going out of play. Your stone might stick around. Or if you chip it, your stone is out of play, and the stone that you hit just sort of moves a bit, and unless you're near the edge of the sheet, it's probably still in play. But you play with peel weight, this is going to shift things. So to make a peel weight shot, you spend a sweep token right at the outset. Right at the outset. When you're calling the shot. Now, if you make contact with that stone is out of play. The stone that you threw is out of play, guaranteed. And making contact includes the chips, right? So the only way, if you make this a peel weight shot, that stone is going to remain in play is if you roll a 5 or 6 and you lose the toss. But the cool thing about this is that you can also then have secondary collisions. So let's say you're looking at a situation like this. There is a chance that not only will you remove this stone, you'll also remove this stone over here. Let's put another stone in play just for the sake of argument. So something I didn't talk at all about in the original game, in the original video, is when you look at the shot chart, there are these shaded regions. Those shaded regions are the threat regions for different hit outcomes, and those threat regions only apply when we're making these peel weight shots. So let's look at a couple of different outcomes. A 2, which would be really ideal for red here, is a hit and a rollover, although remember that both stones are going to be out of place. We're not really going to benefit from that roll. But then the threat zones, there's one to the one just to the inside and one diagonally back to the outside. So the threat zones, I'm just going to mark these with sweep tokens. On an outcome of a 2, these are the threat zones for this shot. So what would happen is we succeed, this stone is out of play, the stone it hits is out of play, and then we flip the fate token. Whoever wins the toss gets to decide, are we going to remove another stone and which stone it is from any of the threat zones, or is the shot just done? So in this case, if red won the toss, red would remove this stone. If yellow won this toss, yellow would say, no, nothing else is hit. But so you have the possibility of a double takeout on something like this. And then if you do choose to remove a stone, you flip again. And so you can have chains of potentially an arbitrary number of stones, but typically like up to 3 or 4 stones being removed, which may or may be of both or either color. So on a 2, these are the areas that are threatened. There's probably about a 50% chance that you'll get this extra yellow stone if you're red. Let's take a look at on the 1 outcome. These are the threats, the threat zones. So again, if you make this outcome, your thrown stone is out of play because you made contact. The stone you hit is out of play because you made contact. And then now we're rolling, or we're flipping the fate token to decide if anything else gets hit. Just because you made the shot doesn't mean this necessarily works out for you, right? In this situation, if red wins this toss, red wants nothing else to be hit. If yellow wins this toss, yellow probably wants to remove that red stone, right? So you ran back, you hit the stone you wanted to hit, but you ran it back into your own stone, and you threw so much weight that everything's knocked out. Let's see, one other outcome here. Now on a 3, these are your threat zones. So in this case, again, we made contact. Red is out of play. Yellow is out of play. We would then flip the fate token to decide who chooses next. And let's say yellow gets it. Yellow has a choice. Yellow can say, all right, nothing else is hit. Shot's done. Or yellow could say, I'm getting rid of this stone here. But if yellow gets rid of the stone here, we're going to flip the token again because there's still stones in those threat zones. And if yellow wins a second time, yellow will say, okay, shot's done. You took out mine, but you also took out your own. That's it. But if red wins that second toss, red can say, oh, I also got this second yellow stone. And then let's just, for completeness, look at what happens on a chip. Let's put an extra stone in play here. Okay, let's say we have a, 6 is fine. So we roll the 6, target's here, and first we flip the fate token, right? So if yellow wins the toss, yellow probably says, you know what, clean miss, you didn't hit anything. And then even the target stone remains in play. If red wins that toss, then red's going to say, okay, I make contact. You make contact, both stones are out of play. And we look at the threat zones. So the threat zones for a 6 are these here. So then we flip the fate token. If red wins the toss, red has the opportunity to remove this stone here as well. Oh, okay, so there are some interactions between what I was talking about with peel weight shots and with freezes. So let's say that red really wants to get rid of this yellow stone. Red throws a regular weight shot. The best he can hope for is to remove the bottom stone, right? Because as long as these stones are stacked, the top stone can't be touched. Now maybe that's helpful. Maybe red has another stone and can afford to take a second shot later on. That's a bit unusual. But if red wants to get rid of that top stone in one shot, the only way to do it is to play peel weight. So if you had a successful outcome, actually any successful outcome, what you're going to have is Okay, you successfully hit your target. It's removed from play. The stone you threw is removed from play, and then there'll be a bunch of threat zones, but there's always going to be every single one of these outcomes has the area in which the target was is one of the threat zones. So now red, will flip the fate token, but if red wins this toss, red can remove this second stone as well. Now red could miss the toss, in which case yellow would say, nope, nothing else is hit. But this is one way that you can deal with frozen stones, is by throwing peel weight at them. That's sometimes not possible in a real game, but often the freeze is not perfect, and if you really chuck hard at it, you can move the front stone out of play, or at least out of position, with a really heavy shot. What else can happen? All right, freezes. Freezes can happen as a result of a hit. So let's take a situation like this, where yellow is just wants to throw a hit at this stone here. Let's say yellow gets a 2, gets a nice roll out of that. So on a 2 outcome, we hit the target, we roll over to here. Now yellow has to roll to settle because they are in the house. If yellow gets a 3, that's a frozen stone. So freezes can happen even off the roll of a hit, and you can end up with like really unusual outcomes. Like, let's say we already had a frozen stone over there. The same thing happens. So yellow, let's say yellow gets a nice roll, knocks the stone out of play, rolls over to here, and gets the freeze. These two stones are stacked. Remember, with the freeze, if there's already a stack of stones, we're going to move the bottom one back, and we're going to place the new stone on top. Now this stone back here is in an area of the house, so it has to roll to settle as well. And in principle, that could be a 5, and it could end up frozen again. It's not super likely, but these are things that can happen. So that's all I wanted to show you with technicalities and some of the weirder things that can happen in the game. Good curling.